course Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes. I am Ark Verma from IIT Kanpur, and we are talking about reasoning and decision making. In the last lecture, I talked to you about inductive reasoning and some of the pitfalls that basically occur in inductive reasoning because of the various biases that affect our making of decisions. Now, I will talk about decision making in this lecture as well, but I will kind of try and evaluate the ways in which we approach making decisions. So, making of decisions practically implies choosing of between courses of action. What do you want to do? Should I go for this or should I go for that? Things about choices of career, choices about marriage, buying a particular kind of a car, buying a particular kind of house or not. And the idea is that we are kind of evaluating these choices, and we try and actually pick up the ones that are more useful for us, that have the more utility for us. Okay, that is at least what initial assumption is. So, let us discuss a little bit about how people approach decisions. One of the most common approaches is called the utility approach. So, the expected utility approach or the expected utility theory is based on the assumption that people are basically rational beings. So, if they have all of the relevant information that is required to make a decision, they will end up making decisions that will maximize the utility. Okay. In economics, utility is referred to as monetary value. So, the idea is that if there is money sort of a decision involved, people will make such a decision that will kind of magnify the monetary output as compared to losing money or something like that. The utility approach specifies procedures that make it possible to determine which choice would result in the highest monetary value. For example, if we know the odds of winning when playing again in a slot machine, and we know about the cost of playing, how much you are going to put each time you play, and the size of the payoff, that what is the payoff like. It will be possible to determine the fact that in the long run, playing in a casino or playing against a slot machine would always result in a losing position. In the long run, you will lose money instead of gaining money for however time you play. But the fact is, just because it is possible to predict the optimum strategy does not really mean that people will follow the optimum strategy. It is just that mathematically this is correct and I know it, but I still do something which is not optimum. And in today's lecture, we will try and see why and what kind of processes intervene in us making decisions which are not optimum. So, people regularly behave in ways that ignore the optimum way of responding to probabilities, even though most people realize that in the long run the casino is actually the winner. The huge popularity of gambling indicates that people decide to patronize casinos anyway. People in the long run know that high consumption of alcohol would lead to diseases and stuff like that. High consumption of junk food would lead to diseases, such like that. But these things are anyways popular, and people are using it, and they are popular, getting popular by the day. So, observations such as the ones I was talking about have basically led psychologists to conclude that people do not always make decisions that result in the desired outcome, or people do not always make decisions that optimize or maximize the utility or monetary value. Let us look at some of the other aspects. For example, Daines, Raj and Epstein basically in 1994, they offered participants the opportunity to earn up to $7 by receiving $1 every time they drew a red jelly bean from a bowl consisting of red and white jelly beans. And there were two bowls, one had 1 red and 9 white jelly beans, and the other had 7 red and 93 white jelly beans. It was shown that a lot of people actually chose the larger bowl, even though the probability of selecting a red bean in the larger bowl was around 7%, whereas in the smaller bowl it was around 10%. So, a lot of participants, when they were asked to explain, they reported that even though they knew that the probabilities were against them when they take the larger bowl, they somehow felt as if they had a better chance if there were more red beans. Something is there which kind of is overpowering their basic rational judgment. So, this is interesting. Similar to this also, you can take another example, that passengers preferring to travel by road instead by air, a sort of thing that there is a better chance of surviving without an accident if I am traveling by road as compared to by air. But the actual data says that more people die in road accidents as compared to people dying in air accidents. So, again this is also something that people are following while they are ignoring things like base rate and things like what is more probable or not. Host and co-workers, they analyzed the contestants' responses, and they analyzed their responses across hundreds of games, and they concluded that the contestants' choices are determined not just by the amounts of money that is left in the suitcases or in the bets, but by also what has happened leading to their decision. Till a point I am coming to make decision, whatever has happened in the past also in some sense will influence whether I will make this bet or not. Post found that if things have been going well for the participant and at the end the bank begins offering more and more, the contestant kind of gets more and more conscious, and they would accept a deal early. In contrast, when contestants are doing poorly and the bank offers go down, they are more likely to keep on playing. Suppose in a gambling game, if you have been winning more and more, and there is more and more higher bets on the thing, you would at some point get a bit more cautious. You are kind of afraid of losing this much. On contrast, if you've been losing more and more and you kind of almost have nothing left, you would be tempted to play more, because in some sense you are hoping that maybe at some point I will win, which will kind of overpower all my losses. This is again simple way how decision making sometimes operates. Suppose suggests that one of the reasons for this behavior on the participants who are doing poorly and they are continuing to play is the fact that they want to avoid the negative feeling of ending up as a loser. So the gambler kind of goes on gambling because at the close of play he does not want to be termed as a loser. He wants to kind of end the balance sheet not in red but in green. So therefore they keep playing, they keep taking more and more risks in the hope of beating the odds and coming out ahead in the end. And this is very interesting. This is kind of counterintuitive in some sense, but it is rather interesting. What might be playing its role in this? I think emotions play a very big role. So emotions, and there is a lot of research which has shown that emotions do affect taking of decisions in a variety of ways. We will talk a little bit about emotions now. So one of the kind of emotions I could talk about is expected emotions. Expected emotions is what people predict they will feel after a particular outcome. For example, a deal or no deal contestant might think about a choice in terms of how good he or she will feel when they win $125,000 in accepting the bank's offer, and they also compare it how great he or she will feel if she wins $500,000, but also how bad he or she will feel if she does not accept the bank's offer and ends up losing. So if the bank is offering a lot of money, they will compare that what will I feel if I accept this offer and I win it. They also compare what happens if I reject this offer and I lose the money. So the idea is, what will I look like if I have lost? What will I feel like if I have lost rather? An interesting fact here is that while expected emotion does provide some information about probable emotional outcomes, it does not really involve actually feeling. You're just hoping that I will feel I'll feel very happy or I'll feel very bad if I have lost. Once that point, once that bridge actually comes, it's very different. It's very difficult to really imagine what you're going to feel, and these two things might not really have a close correspondence, because expected emotion is expected emotion. You're not feeling that emotion at that point in time. So because emotion also potentially provides information, this means that expected information can be a part of the utility approach. They can tell you something, they can be a factor in making the utility decision, because an outcome that results in a positive emotion will likely be considered a good outcome, and one that results in a negative emotion will likely to be treated as a poor outcome. So you can factor this in your utility decisions. On the other hand, you can talk about immediate emotions. Now immediate emotions are emotions that are experienced at a time the decision is being made, when you are actually going to press the button. Now there are two kinds of immediate emotions that we can talk about. The integral immediate emotion is the emotion that is associated with making this decision, whether I am making the correct decision, whether I am making the incorrect decision, how anxious I am feeling because this is such a heavy choice to make, how happy that I am feeling is this is a relatively benign choice to make. So for example, a deal or no deal contestant, again I am taking the example of this game, who is deciding whether to accept or return the bank's offer, might be feeling extremely anxious because this is such a lot of money involved. This anxiety is referred to as the integral anxiety or integral emotion, and can play a very important part in affecting the decision. The other immediate emotion that we can talk about is the incidental immediate emotion. Now, incidental immediate emotion is not really associated with the task of making the judgment. It's basically how the person has been feeling throughout the day. How is the person generally? If I am generally a risk-loving, happy-go-lucky kind of a person, or I am generally a very cautious person, and I am generally very conservative in making these choices. So, incidental emotions again can be caused by a person's general disposition, as I was saying, or they would also be because of the fact that something good happened earlier in the day. So, I am thinking that my day is good, I am going to make a heavy decision, or something bad has happened earlier in the day and I am thinking that maybe the day is already going bad, I will take a more cautious decision here. So, this is also something that will play a part. Now, each of these type of emotions, expected emotions, integral emotions and incidental emotions, can potentially have an effect on how or what kind of decisions I am going to make. But only expected emotions, which involves some element of rational thought, can be handled within the expected utility framework, because other two things, there is no logic of how you will arrive at those things. So, let us go further with how emotions are going to affect decisions. So, one of the factors is that people sometimes inaccurately predict their emotions. A basic characteristic of research on decisions basically shows that there is a phenomena called risk aversion, and the risk aversion phenomena is the tendency to avoid taking risks. For example, a deal or a no deal contestant who decides to accept the banker's offer rather than take a chance on winning big or losing it all may be motivated by risk aversion. You don't want to lose everything that you have, so you want to avoid the risk and you just accept the bank's offer and close the play. Expected emotions are one of the major determinants of risk aversions, because one of the things that increase the chance of risk aversion is the tendency that a particular loss will be rated as highly negative. You will assume that if I lose this, I will feel so bad that I shouldn't lose this and I should take the more cautious choice. I should be the more conservative choice maker. For example, let us take a real example at hand. If people if people believe it would be very disturbing to lose $100, but only slightly pleasant to win $100, then this would cause them to decline a bet for which the odds are 50-50. Suppose there is a coin toss and $100 for heads, $100 for tails. I have to give you $100 if you win, you have to give me $100 if you lose. Now, it is 50-50, but because people think that losing $100 is much more bad as compared to winning $100, they will not take such kind of a bet. In fact, because of this effect, some people are reluctant to take a 50-50 bet in which winning pays $200 and losing pays $100, even though in accordance with the utility theory, this basically should be the same. Kerman and co-workers in 2006, they wanted to study this effect by doing an experiment, and they basically wanted to compare people's expected emotions with their actual emotions, what they expected and what they actually felt. They gave participants $5 and then they told them that based on a coin flip, they would either win another $5 or they would lose $3 out of what they have, this $5. Participants were asked to rate their happiness before the experiment started, and they predicted how their happiness would change if they win the coin toss. The results of these so I will show you the results in a while. You will see that participants basically rate that they would they negative on losing $3 as compared to they will feel much less positive if they win another $5. Here you can see that participant they rate losing $3 as much more negative as compared to winning $5. After the coin toss has happened, in which some participants won and some lost, they carried out a filler task for 10 minutes and then they were asked to rate their happiness once again. The bars on the right side here actually show that they actually did feel more positive on winning $5 and they felt much less negative as compared to what they had estimated before the coin toss. They felt much less negative about losing $3 now. So, you see there is a gap between expected emotions and actual emotions that are being felt, and one wonders how these kind of things operate and affect our decision making. Certainly, we somehow overestimate we overestimate the cost of losing something, the cost of the negative outcome. We overestimate that how bad we are going to feel. So, why do people overestimate their negative feelings? What could be the reason? One of the reasons is that when making their predictions, they don't really take into account the various coping mechanisms that they have. Even if you lose this, you have family, you have this, you have that, and this should help you to deal with adversity. Sometimes people don't take these things into account. For example, a person who does not get a job he wanted might be able to rationalize the failure by saying the salary was not really what I wanted. These results show that there is this inability to correctly predict the actual emotional outcome of the decision, and that is what is leading people to make so many of the wrong decisions, because they are overestimating negative outcomes. Let us talk a little bit about how incidental emotions might affect decisions. So, what happens is there is a lot of evidence that shows that decision making is also affected by incidental emotions, even though they are not really directly related to the decision. A very good example is that there was a paper titled Clouds Make Nerds Look Good. Simonson in 2007, he reported an analysis of university admission decisions in which he found that applicants' academic attributes were more heavily weighted on cloudy days than on sunny days. So, in cloudy days, basically nerds by this paper, their academic attributes were given much more weight as compared to their other attributes, personality and so on and so forth. In another study, he found that prospective students visiting an academically highly rated university were more likely to enroll if they had visited a campus on a cloudy day. Their rating of the university is also kind of influenced by these things. In a different study by Lerner and colleagues in 2004, participants viewed one of 3 film clips calculated to elicit emotions. They saw a person dying, and they saw a person using a dirty toilet, and they saw fish at the Great Barrier Reef. So, 3 kind of clips they were seeing. Participants in the sadness and disgust groups were also asked to write about how they would feel if they were they were in the same situation. How would they feel that if they were involved in the dying thing, or they were involved in using the dirty clip, or they were actually seeing fish at the reef. Lerner and co-workers found, and they basically then gave participants a highlighter set, and they determined the price for which. So, again, this is not related, we are talking about manipulation of incidental emotion. The task is something else. So, Lerner and co-workers then gave participants a highlighter set, and they determined the price for which the participants would be willing to sell the set. So, they were given this, and they are asked that how much you will sell this for, and the price that they would be willing to choose the set instead of accepting the money. So, they will not part with the set and refuse the money. The choice condition is roughly equivalent to setting the price they would pay for it. It's just like asking how much would you pay for it. The results show that participants in the disgust and sadness conditions were willing to sell the set for much less than the neutral group. So, there were 3 groups, one was the neutral group, one were the sad group and the disgust group. They were, because their incidental emotions were generally on the negative side, they just wanted to part with the set, and they kind of were agreeing to sell the set for much less as compared to the neutral group. Lerner suggests that this is occurring because disgust is associated with the need to expel things, and sad emotions are associated with the need for change. So, both of these emotions, even though they are not really directly involved in the pen or highlighter selling task, they are in some sense affecting how people are making these decisions. This also kind of fits with the idea that sadness is being associated with the need of change. The proposed reasons behind this setting setting of buying and selling prices are kind of hypothetical at this point, but whatever the reasons be, the results kind of show that people's moods may really affect their decisions. At least that much you can take away from this. And here is the 3 groups: neutral, disgusted and sad, and you see the kind of differences in price. You will see that the neutral group is selling for much higher price than the disgusted and sad groups, and similarly in the other case. The choice to buy, the sad group is willing to pay more in that sense. Okay. Now, we talked about expected emotions, we talked about incidental emotions. Decisions other than emotions can also be affected by how the choices are presented. What kind of way you present the choices to people, that could also affect. So, for example, how the wording of the problem can influence a decision, and this was demonstrated by Slovic and co-workers in 2000. They showed forensic psychologists and psychiatrists a case history of a mental patient, and this mental patient was named Mrs. Jones, and they asked them to judge the likelihood that the patient would commit an act of violence within 6 months of being discharged. The key variable in the experiment was the nature of a statement that presented the information about various cases. When they were told 20 out of every 100 patients similar to Mrs. Jones are estimated to commit an act of violence, 41% refused to discharge Mrs. Jones. On the second case, what is happening is, when they were told that patients similar to Mrs. Jones are estimated to have a 20% chance of committing an act of violence, only 21% refused to discharge. So, the idea is, because you are framing it differently, it seems that if you are presenting the larger likelihood that this person will commit an act of violence, then people are not willing to discharge. If you are presenting in such a way that there is less likelihood that this person will commit violence, then more people are willing to discharge. Why is there such a difference? Why is this really happening? It is possible that the first statement conjures of images of 20 people being beaten up, whereas the second is a more abstract probability statement that could be interpreted to mean that there is only a small chance that people like Mrs. Jones will be violent. So, you can actually just look at this again. The first statement is 20 out of every 100 patients similar to Mrs. Jones are estimated to commit an act of violence, and the other is patients similar to Mrs. Jones are estimated to have a 20% chance of committing an act of violence. So, the percentage is kind of similar, but is basically in terms of, here also we are talking about 20, and there also we are talking about 20, but there we are talking about 20 of 100, which is a more tangible thing. Here in the second statement, we are just talking about an abstract probability, which kind of probably makes it less likely that this will happen. 20% out of 100% is much lesser as compared to 20 people getting beaten up. Another example. So, imagine that and this is an example from Goldstein's book. Imagine that United States is preparing for an outbreak of an unusual disease that is expected to kill 600 people. Two alternative programs to combat these diseases have been proposed. Assume that the scientific estimates of the consequences are as follows. If program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved. If program B is adopted, there is a 1/3 possibility that 600 people will be saved, and a 2/3 possibility that nobody will be saved. Which of the two programs would you favor? Now, in a different setting, consider the following additional proposals for the same disease. If program C is adopted, 400 people will die. If program D is adopted, there is a 1/3 possibility that nobody will die, and 2/3 possibility that 600 people will die. Now, you see that A and B statements and C and D programs are kind of very similar to each other, but when participants were offered the first pair of the proposal, 72% of the participants in an experiment at Tversky and Kahneman chose program A, and the rest chose program B. The choice of program A basically reflects the risk aversion strategy. In the second one, when Tversky and Kahneman presented programs C and D to a different group of participants, 22% picked program C and 78% picked program D. Now, this is basically the risk taking strategy. If you again look at this, if program D is adopted, there is a 1/3 probability that nobody will die, and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. 1/3 probability that nobody will die is a risk kind of a scenario, even though the odds are kind of similar, but the risk taking strategy is invoked because the program D is framed in a particular way. Now, Tversky and Kahneman concluded that in general, when a choice is framed in terms of gains, people use a risk aversion strategy, and when a choice is framed in terms of losses, people use a risk taking strategy. You can liken this to the gambler example that I was talking about. But if we look at more closely, we will know that A and C both result in the death of, that is what I was saying, A and C both result in the death of 400 people and 200 people are saved, yet 72% of people are picking up A over B. Similarly, C and D are exactly the same, but you see 70% people take D, and a lot of them leave out A. So, this is referred to as the framing effect. The framing effect basically says that decisions and how you are going to make a decision is influenced by the wording or by the framing of the problem. Now, Another aspect other than framing effect is the role of justification. So, Tversky and Shafir in 1992 presented the following problem to a groups of students. The pass group, so there were two groups, the pass group who are going to pass and the fail group. The pass group saw the statement indicating that they passed, the fail group saw the statement indicating that they had failed. So, just look at this example, again borrowed from Goldstein. Imagine that you have taken a tough qualifying examination, it is the end of the semester, you feel tired and run down, and you find out that you passed the exam, or it is the end of the semester, you feel tired and run down, and you find out that you failed the exam and you will have to take it again in a couple of months after the Christmas holiday. Now, you now have the opportunity to buy a very attractive 5-day Christmas vacation package to Hawaii at an exceptionally low price. The special offer expires tomorrow. Now, the options are, would you buy the package, not buy the package, pay a $5 non-refundable fee in order to retain the right to buy the vacation package, or the same exceptional price the day after tomorrow. The results for these two groups showed that there is no difference between the two groups. 54% in the pass group and 57% in the fail group opted to buy the package. Now, the interesting result must have happened when a third group was given the situation, except these participants were told that the outcome of the exam will not be available for 2 more days. So, what happens here? Only 32% of the participants opted for the package and 61% decided that they would pay $5 so that they could put off the decision making. They are kind of linking the decision to whether they will pass or not. You can see this here. Now, this is basically Tversky and Shafir suggests that once students know the outcome, they can assign a justification for buying or not buying. The failed students would say that, okay, I failed, I just need to go to the vacation, come back, and I will try harder for the next semester. The pass students will anyways use it as an option for rejoicing that I have succeeded, I have passed, and I should go away. The third group basically do not have that justification yet, and so they kind of want to put this off. So, I think this was all from me about the various aspects of decision making, about the various approaches that people make towards decision making, the emotions and the utility approaches, and so on and so forth. We have concluded our section on reasoning and decision making. Next week, we will begin with a new cognitive.